Hey folks, I just wanted to bring you guys up to speed a little bit on the Module M exercise for information management. Some of you have been having some difficulty with it, so I'm going to go walk you through a little bit of explanation on what I want to see you have done. So I'm going to work this Module M a little bit further out until next weekend. So it'll be due after Thanksgiving holiday on Sunday evening. So Extended Learning Module M, if you've not already accessed the PDF, go to the Connect website, look at the Extended Learning Module M, and you really need to read through that. And there's a lot of new information in here for some of you. I'm just scrolling through this a bit. There's explanations on each of the different elements of the VBA tools that are within Excel. Visual Basic also exists as a standalone set of tools that you could install outside of Excel, but it comes as part of Excel. So some of this stuff might be confusing, some of it might not be, but pay attention to the requirements for question number 4 in the assignments and exercise at the very bottom. If you read through this real closely, basically what it's asking you to do is to come up with a letter grade for each one of those score ranges here. So if you get between a 90 or 100, that gets an A, and so on and so forth. But at the very bottom here, they give you a little bit of information about what to do, what to look for specifically. So he's suggesting that you look at a select case problem. And that's a specific description that refers back up here into the document itself, where it talks about variables and constraints, sub-procedures. It talks about all this stuff. But if you go down to page, looks like 21, I believe it is, select case structure, this gives you an idea about how this might actually work. There's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a lot of different designs for programming, and that's kind of a little bit like what an artist is. So there's no right way to do this, but there's some simpler ways to do this. So one of the things I would recommend is, I'm going to take you here real quick. I've already downloaded the Excel MM workbook that has one sheet in it called grades, and this is the set of grades that they've given you, the letter or scores, excuse me, that they've given you. I've adjusted some of them. You can see to be there's a 34, there's a 95, 66, 78. I think there's maybe an 80 something in here somewhere. We'll make one. Oh, there's one. 85. Okay, so I've got a wide variety of scores in there now. Out of the box, they didn't give that to you. It looked like they were all A's, which is a bit of a problem. Now, the other thing that I would probably recommend, since we want to treat these as numbers, is to probably format these things as numbers. So I'm going to go over here in General, and I'm going to treat them as numbers. And I can make them look however I want to. I can decrease the decimals if I want to here. But they're being treated as numbers, which is really important. So if I come into my letter grades, I want to put letters in each one of these, and I could type them like I am right now, which is a pain in the neck. And if the scores change, well, then I'll have to go back in and change all the letter grades as well. So the idea here is that we want to automate this a bit. So if we press the Alt key and then the F11 key, that takes us to the Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications for this workbook, XLMM_grades. And in my case, that's parentheses 2.xls. I want to insert a module here. And when I insert a module, that means that it's associated with this entire workbook. So all of the sheets within this workbook can now access this particular module, this code that I'm going to be writing here. So I'm just going to show you briefly how to get started here. But I want to create a function, and I'm going to call it the getGrade function, and it's going to accept the variable that I'm going to call is score. So score is going to be my variable, and its data type is going to be a double. And you don't really need to get too concerned about knowing all the data types. Just know that there's different data types that are out there. Now, this is where some of you are missing out on things. This is a select case statement. The select case is going to be using the score. So that's our variable right there. We're feeding this code the score. And the score is going to be that numeric score that the student received on that particular assignment or that test or what have you. The case is going to look something like this. The case is going to be if the score is less than, let's say, what do we say, 65. If it's less than 65, then the function is going to get, so the getGrade function will assign the letter grade of F. And if the case after that is going to be if it's less than 70, excuse me, the number is 70, then the getGrade is going to get a D, and so on and so forth, until you get to the last basically part of the, I'm going to take you down one more. So there's going to be some other things there, but the last case is going to be that if it's anything else, then it gets to be the only thing that's left, which is an A. So this whole function, this whole thing is going to get called in a very particular way. And let me just show you here real quickly. I'm going to save my work here. I'm going to close this. I'm going to close that. And some of you may be familiar with how to call functions from within Excel. So you could call the sum function, or you could call the average function, or you could call there's a lot of different built-in functions, but we want to call the getGrade function. And so if I type in getGrade, let's see what happens here. So if I tab over and I click on cell B2, which is where the score is at, I should get a letter grade. And I can carry that down and I can begin to test out my function against the scores that are here. So each of these cells are calling the function, and it's looking at the cell to the left, and it's coming up with the appropriate score. So if I continue my way down here, I'll see that each one of these is giving me the score for that particular number to the left. Cell B13 has a score of 78, and that should be a C. So if I look at my grading score, that's true. So if I look at a score of 34, that should be an F. A score of 66, that should be a D. What if I change one of these to 69.999? What will that do? Well, we should get a D still. It shows up as a 70 because it's rounding that number. So if I change the decimal, if I change the decimals here, actually that's not going to do it, but you can see the actual score here is 69.99. And so by default it's rounding those numbers up. So a 95 would get an A, there's the 85, and so the scores appear to be correct. Now there's one other thing that you're going to need to be able to do, because I've already enabled macros within this particular workbook. But if you go up to the file, if you go up to file and you go to options, if you're using Excel 2013, and you go to Trust Center, click on the Trust Center, and then on the left-hand side, click on the macros. You'll need to make sure that Enable All Macros is enabled. Otherwise, you will not be able to run or call that macro within here. So that's an important change that you have to make. And if you don't do that, it's not going to work. Additionally, in order for that to happen, after you've made that change in the settings, you'll have to literally close this document, and you will have to reopen that. Maybe. And once you reopen it, then you'll be able to see where the Get Grades is going to be located. So you can see that I could put the Get Grade over here, and that would be for that row right there. And the other thing I can do is I can actually look at all of my formulas by pressing the Control key and the tilde key just beneath the Escape key on my keyboard. And then the other thing that I can do is I can look at my formulas and I can trace the precedence, and I can begin to see, let me make this a little wider here, I can begin to see which things are connected where. So if I remove the arrows and I want to see which thing is connected to that column, I can see that as well. So if I put my Get Grades down here and I want to have it for that score right there, I could do that. That'd be kind of goofy, but I think you kind of get the idea. So if I press the Control tilde key a couple of times, it will actually remove the formulas, and then if I remove the arrows, you'll be able to see my finished up worksheet. I'm going to get rid of these because that's just confusing. I wouldn't normally put letter grades out there on the outliers. I would keep them right where they belong so that anybody who looks at this is going to see that on line 17, Brian Jordan scored a 95, received an A. Bill Hammer scored a 69.9999 and got a D. All right, well, hopefully that helps you a bit. There's some maneuvering that you're going to have to do to make this work. And I want each one of you to be able to do this, and I want you to be able to essentially understand why. So if you don't understand why, let's talk about that a little bit more. But these are fundamental concepts. If you go on to any further science or business class, you're going to have to know how this works. You're going to need to understand why. And if you have another way to do it, it may not be appropriate because everybody else is using this as their tool set. So just kind of keep that in mind. And if you have questions, let's talk about that a little bit further. But again, I'm going to extend this Module M so that it's available for you to work on until Sunday evening after Thanksgiving. So that would be, looks like November 30th. So November 30th at 11:59. Alrighty, folks.